I still had the scent of wedding roses in my hair when I found my clothes thrown in trash bags on the curb. It was the morning after my son's wedding. The day I thought I'd gained a daughter. Instead, she stood on the porch, arms folded, and said coldly, "You don't live here anymore." My son said nothing, not even goodbye. I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I left. And the next morning, I opened the will and erased her name from it, just like she erased my place in their home. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The morning air was crisp, sunlight slanting across the quiet street. When Ellie Montgomery opened her eyes to the sound of a hard thud against her front porch, she thought, at first, that it was the newspaper boy tossing the morning edition. But the sound came again, heavier this time, dragging and final. Pulling on her robe, Ellie stepped to the front door and froze. Her blouses, her cardigans, her shoes. All of it, her life folded, wrinkled, and stuffed into garbage bags, lay scattered across the walkway like someone had dumped trash on the curb. And standing at the top of the steps, hands on her hips, was Rachel. "You can take your things and go," Rachel said, voice sharp as broken glass. "This isn't your home anymore. Michael and I don't need you hovering around." Ellie swallowed hard, her pulse loud in her ears. For one dizzy second, she thought she'd misheard. But the satisfaction gleaming in Rachel's eyes told her otherwise. The neighborhood was waking, cars rolled past. A jogger slowed to gawk. A delivery truck pulled to the curb, 2 doors down. And there was Ellie, her dignity piled in bags on the concrete. "Rachel," Ellie said evenly, keeping her voice steady though her cheeks burned, "this is my house. My name is on every paper tied to this property." Rachel's laugh was quick, dismissive. "Oh, please, Michael and I are married now. You think he's going to let you keep control of everything? No, Ellie, your time here is over." Humiliation clawed up Ellie's throat. She wanted to shout, to shove those bags back through the door, to remind Rachel of every sacrifice she'd made to give her son a life of comfort. But instead, she bent down, picked up one of the bags, and cinched it tighter. "You're making a mistake," she murmured. Rachel leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "The only mistake would be letting you keep meddling in our lives. Consider this a clean break. Goodbye." And with that, she slammed the door, the sound reverberating through Ellie's chest like a gunshot. Ellie stood in the driveway, her belongings at her feet. A neighbor from across the street peeked through a curtain, then quickly let it fall. Shame prickled hot across her skin. She lifted each bag one by one, setting them neatly in the trunk of her car. She moved slowly, deliberately, as though precision could keep her hands from trembling. Inside, her anger stirred, dark and heavy, but she pressed it down. She would not give Rachel the satisfaction of a scene. When the last bag was loaded, Ellie leaned against the car, drawing a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The scent of cut grass drifted on the wind. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower roared to life. Ordinary sounds in an ordinary morning, except nothing about this moment felt ordinary. "Ellie," she turned. Grace Matthews, her oldest friend, stood on the sidewalk clutching a paper cup of coffee. Her gray curls pinned back but loose strands blowing wild. She'd seen it, of course she had. Grace's eyes swept the bags, the shut door, the trembling in Ellie's shoulders that she hadn't managed to hide. "Oh, honey," Grace said softly, stepping forward. "She actually did it." Ellie pressed her lips into a thin line. "She did." Grace set the coffee aside and took Ellie's hands, grounding her. "Listen to me. You are Ellie Montgomery. You built this house, this life. You raised Michael into the man he is. That girl can throw your clothes on the street, but she can't erase what you've built." Ellie's throat tightened, but she only nodded. Her pulse steadied under Grace's grip, though anger simmered hotter now, sharper. Grace squeezed her hands once more and whispered, "Don't let her think she's won." Ellie glanced back at the closed door, Rachel's domain now, at least for the moment. She could almost hear her gloating on the other side, reveling in victory. Ellie straightened, her eyes narrowing, her voice calm but steel-lined. She has no idea what she started. And as she slid behind the wheel, the reflection in the rearview mirror wasn't of a humiliated woman at all, but of someone calculating, someone ready to strike back. The living room was quiet except for the tick of the grandfather clock and the faint hum of traffic drifting through the open window. Ellie sat at her oak desk, a yellow legal pad in front of her, pen poised but unmoving. The words at the top, Last Will and Testament Review, stared back at her like a dare. She tapped the pen against the margin, her eyes skimming over the thick folder of documents she'd kept tucked away for years. Every line, every asset, every contingency plan had been designed with one purpose: to make sure Michael never had to struggle the way she once had. Now that future felt fragile, as if one woman's greed could unravel decades of sacrifice. Ellie set the pen down and pressed her palms flat on the desk, closing her eyes. She saw it, her younger self, showing houses in sweltering heat, staying up late crunching numbers, pinching pennies so Michael could attend good schools. She'd spent her prime building something that would outlast her. And now Rachel had the audacity to treat her like a nuisance, like baggage left on the curb. Her jaw tightened. Not again. Never again. The front door creaked, and Grace's familiar voice called, "Ellie, you home?" Ellie rose, smoothing her blouse, and found Grace carrying a paper sack from the bakery. The smell of cinnamon rolls filled the room, but Ellie had no appetite. "You look like you're plotting a bank heist," Grace said, setting the sack down on the coffee table. "Not a heist," Ellie answered, her voice cool. "A safeguard." She gestured toward the papers. "Rachel will not lay her hands on what I've built." Grace's eyes softened. "But there was steel behind them, too. Then you know what you have to do. Protect it legally. Cut her out before she finds a way in." Ellie picked up the will, flipping through the pages. The neat black ink blurred for a moment, her vision misting, but she blinked it away. "Michael doesn't see it yet. He thinks he married a dream, but I know what she is." Grace lowered herself onto the couch, watching Ellie with the patience of a woman who'd fought her own wars. "If she's half as dangerous as I suspect, this isn't about feelings anymore. It's about strategy." Ellie's hand trembled only slightly as she reached for her phone. She scrolled to the number she hadn't dialed in years: Tracy Wills, a lawyer she trusted once to close deals and untangle contracts. Without hesitation, she pressed call. The line clicked, and a crisp, professional voice answered. "Tracy Wills." "Tracy, it's Ellie Montgomery. I need to amend my will. Immediately." There was a pause, then a deliberate tone. "Ellie, it's been a long time. Come by tomorrow morning. We'll handle it. Whatever it is, we'll lock it down." "Thank you," Ellie said, and ended the call. Grace exhaled, almost smiling. That's the Ellie I know. But Ellie wasn't smiling. Her gaze fell to the pile of evidence she'd begun assembling. Receipts Rachel had forgotten to give back, whispered comments from Alice Richards about Rachel's behavior at the wedding, little threads that, when pulled, unraveled the shiny fabric Rachel had draped around herself. One by one, Ellie placed the papers into a neat folder. She'd built her fortune on details, and it would be details that destroyed Rachel. The clock chimed the hour. Ellie glanced at the window where twilight bled across the sky, washing the street in gold. She thought of Rachel inside Michael's new house, lounging, laughing, believing she'd already won. Ellie's lips curved, not in mirth, but in resolve. She had just redrawn the battlefield. The courthouse steps gleamed under the Florida sun, the marble railing warm beneath Ellie's fingertips as she climbed. Her briefcase was heavier than it should have been, though it carried only one folder. The weight wasn't paper, it was history. Every line she was about to sign would sever Rachel Montgomery's fingers from the future she thought she had secured. Inside, the air was cool, tinged with the faint scent of polished wood and old files. Tracy Wills's office sat at the end of a long hallway, her name in clean brass letters across frosted glass. Ellie paused, adjusted her jacket, and stepped inside. Tracy rose from behind her desk, her handshake firm, her sharp eyes taking in Ellie's taut posture. "You look like a woman on a mission," she said. Ellie lowered herself into the leather chair, steady but unsmiling. "I am." Minutes later, the revised will lay before her. Tracy tapped the signature line with a pen. "Once you sign, it's done. Rachel Montgomery will have no claim on your estate." Ellie studied the document. The assets listed there were not just numbers. They were decades of sacrifice. equity pulled from houses she'd flipped, rental properties she'd managed, investments she'd studied late into the night. The home she sat in every day was more than a structure. It was her life written in brick and wood. Her pen hovered. She thought of Michael, her son, the boy she'd raised with scraped knees and math homework, the man now blind to his wife's manipulation. Would he hate her for this? Would he see it as betrayal rather than protection? Her jaw set. Love had built this legacy, and love would guard it, even if Michael didn't understand now. She pressed the pen down, each stroke of her name steady, final, unshakable. Tracy nodded, collecting the document. It's done. The estate transfers fully to Michael under your conditions. Rachel is out. No loopholes. A quiet satisfaction coursed through Ellie. Not joy, not triumph, but something steadier. Control. Across town, Rachel twirled in front of a boutique mirror, the silk of a designer dress catching the light. A circle of women, her new friends, shallow and eager, watched as she preened. Michael says money isn't an issue, Rachel bragged, smoothing the fabric against her hips. His mother practically funded our house. Honestly, I don't even know why she's still hanging around. Laughter rippled through the group. One of them whispered, "Must be hard living with her," and Rachel smirked. "Oh, she's gone now, finally. It's our space, and soon it'll all be ours. Michael's inheritance, her house, everything." Her voice was sweet, but her eyes glinted with hunger. The boutique clerk boxed the dress, and Rachel handed over Michael's credit card without hesitation. Back in her car outside the courthouse, Ellie's phone buzzed. She answered immediately. "Ellie," Tracy said, her tone brisk. "The documents are filed. The new will is sealed. No one, not even Michael, can change it without your consent." Ellie exhaled slowly, her hand tightening on the steering wheel. "Good. Then Rachel is finished." She hung up, watching pedestrians cross the street, their lives unfolding in ordinary rhythms. For them, it was just another Tuesday. For her, it was the day she redrew the lines of her family's future. Yet even as she sat there, her chest heavy with resolve, a gnawing unease lingered. Rachel didn't lose quietly. Ellie knew that much already. Signing the will had been the easy part. What came next would test every ounce of her resolve. Ellie sat at her kitchen table long after sunset, the will folder still resting within arm's reach. The house was quiet, but her mind was loud, calculating, reordering, sharpening. Signing her name hadn't been the end. It was merely the beginning. Rachel wasn't going to fold. That woman would claw, manipulate, and play Michael like a violin until he believed every sour note. Ellie had seen it before in clients, investors, and competitors. Charm masking rot, confidence disguising desperation. Her phone lay face up beside her, the screen reflecting the glow of the pendant lamp. Ellie dialed a number she hadn't called in years. When the line picked up, a gravelly voice answered, "Daryl Carter." "It's Ellie Montgomery," she said evenly. A pause, then a low chuckle. "Well, I'll be damned. Haven't heard that name in a while. What can I do for you?" "I need you to look into someone. Rachel Montgomery. She's tied to my son, and I want every stone turned over. Finances, history, habits, everything." Daryl's tone shifted, professional and sharp. "You think she's dirty?" "I don't think," Ellie replied, her words clipped. "I know, I just need proof." There was the sound of scribbling on his end. "Give me a week." "You'll have 3 days," Ellie countered. "I'll pay whatever it takes." Another pause, then a grunt of agreement. 3 days, you'll hear from me." Ellie ended the call, a steady calm washing over her. The first chess piece had moved. The following afternoon, she met Grace and Tracy at a quiet booth in the corner of a downtown coffee shop. The air smelled of espresso and baked bread, but their conversation cut through the warmth like steel. Tracy spread out the documents, pointing to clauses Ellie had barely noticed before. "The will is secure, but Rachel could try to contest it. We'll need airtight evidence of her character, or lack thereof, to hold off any legal challenges." Grace leaned in, voice low. "So the investigator's job ties directly into this. If Rachel's done anything shady, and I'd bet my last dollar she has, it'll keep her from touching a dime." Ellie sipped her coffee, eyes fixed on the papers. "She won't see a dime. Not now, not ever." Tracy gave a small, approving nod. "Then we're all aligned." That evening, Ellie returned home, her steps echoing across the tiled floor. She was locking the back door when a knock rattled the front. She opened it to find Rachel standing on the porch. Hair carefully curled, makeup flawless, a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Ellie," she said sweetly, "I wanted to talk. Maybe I came on too strong before. I think we got off on the wrong foot." Ellie's gaze lingered on the younger woman, on the expensive shoes, the faint scent of high-end perfume that didn't match Rachel's so-called modest background. Everything about her screamed performance. Ellie didn't move aside. "This isn't the place, Rachel." Rachel tilted her head, feigning innocence. "I just want us to get along. Michael loves you. I love Michael. Can't we put the past behind us?" Ellie's expression stayed cold, unreadable. "You'll forgive me if I don't take your word at face value." For the first time, Rachel's smile faltered, just a hair. Then she laughed softly, shaking her head as if Ellie were the stubborn one. "Suit yourself," she turned, her heels clicking against the porch as she walked away. Ellie closed the door slowly, locking it with deliberate care. Later, as she settled into her chair by the window, Ellie felt the weight of it all pressing down, the betrayal, the fragile line between love for her son and hatred for the woman who'd ensnared him. Yet beneath the heaviness, her resolve burned hotter than ever. Rachel thought charm could win the day. But Ellie had built empires from grit and foresight. She knew exactly how to dismantle a pretender. The call came just after dawn. Ellie was still nursing her first cup of coffee when the phone buzzed across the counter, Daryl's name flashing on the screen. "Tell me you've got something," she said, without preamble. Daryl's voice was gravel laced with certainty. "I've got more than something. Rachel's been moving money, quietly, under Michael's name. 2 accounts opened in the last 6 weeks. She's funneled close to 50 grand already." Ellie's fingers tightened around the mug, the heat biting her skin. "Michael doesn't even know." "Doubt it. The signatures look clean, but the transfers are too slick. She's been planning this since before the wedding." Ellie closed her eyes, steadying herself. "Send me everything. You'll have it in an hour." When the line went dead, Ellie stood at the window, watching the sun bleed orange over the rooftops. The morning was beautiful, almost mocking. Rachel was draining her son's future, and Michael didn't even see the knife pressed against his throat. Later that afternoon, Ellie met Michael at his favorite diner, the one with vinyl booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. He looked tired, his tie loosened, his smile strained. "Mom," he said, sliding into the booth, "Rachel told me you've been interfering." Ellie's chest tightened, but she leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Michael, listen to me. Rachel is taking money from accounts in your name. I have the records. This isn't interference, it's protection." Michael frowned, his hand running through his hair. "Rachel wouldn't do that. She said you'd say things like this. She warned me." Ellie pulled the folder from her bag, sliding it across the table. "Then look at the statements. Bank accounts you never opened. Transfers you never authorized. Your name forged." He hesitated, eyes skimming the documents. But then he pushed them back toward her. "She'll explain. There has to be some reason." Ellie's jaw clenched. Her son was drowning, and he refused the lifeline. "Michael, I've already amended my will. You'll be protected. Everything I've built will be yours, under conditions Rachel can't touch. She can't bleed you dry unless you let her." His eyes flickered with something, guilt maybe, or fear, but his voice stayed firm. "I don't want to be in the middle of this. She's my wife." Ellie reached for his hand across the table, her voice softening. "And you're my son. I won't cut you out, but Rachel won't see a penny. That's the deal. You stay protected, no matter how blind you choose to be." Michael pulled his hand back, his gaze sliding to the window. "You don't understand her like I do." Ellie swallowed the retort burning on her tongue. Instead, she rose, leaving the folder on the table. "One day you'll see. When you do, remember I warned you." That evening, Daryl arrived at Ellie's house, his expression grim. He dropped another folder on her kitchen counter, thicker this time. "You said 3 days. I gave you 2. And you're not going to like this." Ellie flipped the folder open. The pages inside showed checks, loan applications, withdrawal slips. Her breath caught. Each carried Michael's signature, except it wasn't his. The handwriting was neat, practiced, forged. She's been stealing in his name, Daryl said. Not just accounts, loan documents, credit lines. She's setting him up to drown in debt, and if she gets bold enough, she'll try to backdoor your assets too. One document already listed your estate as collateral. Ellie's vision blurred, the edges of the page trembling in her hands. Rachel wasn't just siphoning from Michael, she was reaching for everything Ellie had fought for. She's forging him, Ellie whispered. My God. She's trying to take everything. Daryl met her eyes, his tone flat. If we don't move fast, she'll succeed. Ellie steadied herself against the counter, fury searing through her humiliation. Rachel thought she was clever, untouchable, but she had just crossed a line no one came back from. Ellie spread the documents across her dining room table, the polished surface buried under papers and screenshots. Account numbers, forged checks, loan applications. All the evidence Daryl had unearthed. The more she looked, the more Rachel's scheme came into focus. It wasn't reckless greed. It was careful, deliberate theft. She pulled out a fresh folder and began cataloging each piece. Copies went into neat stacks, one for Tracy, one for Daryl's files, and one she'd keep close to her chest. She'd built her career on details, and now those details would become Rachel's undoing. As she worked, her phone lit up with a text from Michael. We need to talk. Tonight. Her stomach tightened. She knew Rachel had gotten to him. That evening, Michael showed up at her door, his face weary, his shoulders slumped. He didn't step inside. Instead, he stood on the porch like a visitor, shifting uneasily. Rachel says you're trying to ruin her, he began. Ellie's breath caught, but she kept her voice calm. What did she tell you? That you've been digging through our finances, hiring people, looking for ways to push her out. She says you've hated her since day one. Ellie studied her son, the man she had raised, the boy she once held as he cried over scraped knees. Now he looked torn in half. She reached into her folder and handed him a single page. Read it, Michael. He scanned the document. An account statement showing withdrawals he hadn't made, his brow furrowed. This doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense, Ellie replied softly. She's been forging your name, taking your money, and if you don't wake up, she'll bury you in debt you never signed for. Michael's voice cracked. She said you'd twist things, that you'd stop at nothing to push her out. Ellie's throat tightened, but she refused to let her voice break. I'm not twisting anything, I'm protecting you, just like I always have. For a long moment, silence hung between them, heavy as lead. Then Michael shook his head, thrusting the paper back toward her. I can't do this, not right now. He walked away before she could respond, leaving Ellie standing in the doorway, the night air cool against her burning skin. Back at Michael's house, Rachel was waiting. She had set the stage, candles lit, music low, her voice syrupy sweet. Baby, I know she showed you something, Rachel cooed, sliding close, resting her hand on his chest. But think about it. Who benefits if you turn against me? She wants control. That's all this is. She can't stand that you're building your own life. Michael hesitated, his jaw tight. But the signatures? Rachel's eyes shimmered with mock hurt. So now you don't trust me, after everything? She's your mother, Michael. Of course she's jealous. She wants you tied to her forever. Don't you see? This isn't about money, it's about power. Her words wove around him like smoke, suffocating reason. Michael turned away, torn between loyalty and doubt. But his silence gave Rachel the opening she needed. She pressed a kiss against his cheek, whispering, Don't let her poison us. Meanwhile, Ellie sat alone in her quiet living room, the papers spread around her like shattered glass. She thought of every sacrifice, the years of single motherhood, the endless hours closing deals, the sleepless nights worrying about bills. All of it had been for Michael, and now Rachel was undoing it piece by piece, turning Michael's own heart against her. Ellie pressed her palms against her eyes, steadying herself. You don't get to erase me, she whispered into the silence. Not after everything I gave. The clock ticked on, each second fueling her resolve. She wasn't finished. She would not let Rachel win. Ellie didn't call ahead. She drove straight to Michael and Rachel's house, the folder of evidence riding shotgun like a loaded weapon. The gated subdivision gleamed with manicured lawns and perfect hedges. But beneath the polish, Ellie saw rot, her son's future already hollowed by lies. Michael answered the door, surprise flashing across his face. Before he could speak, Rachel appeared behind him, her smile too quick, too bright. "Ellie," Rachel said smoothly, "what a surprise. I'm not here for pleasantries." Ellie's tone was sharp steel. She pushed past them both, setting the folder on the kitchen island. "We're going to talk." Michael shut the door reluctantly. "Mom, this isn't—" "Sit," Ellie ordered. Her voice left no room for argument. Rachel crossed her arms, but her eyes flickered warily as Ellie spread the documents across the counter. Account statements, forged checks, loan approvals. The paper trail told the story without embellishment. "You've been stealing in Michael's name," Ellie said, her voice calm, deliberate. "You opened accounts he never touched. You forged his signature on loan applications. You tied my estate as collateral to debts he didn't agree to. These are your lies, Rachel. Every one of them." Rachel's laugh came out brittle. "That's absurd. Anybody could have printed these. How do you even know they're real?" Ellie slid one page forward. The inked signature identical to Michael's. Then she placed a sample of his legitimate signature beside it. The differences, subtle but damning, were undeniable. Michael leaned closer, his brows knitting. For the first time, doubt carved lines across his face. "Rachel?" Rachel's voice rose, sharp with indignation. "She's manipulating you, Michael. She's always hated me, always tried to turn you against me. Can't you see? She hired someone to fake this." But her performance faltered under Ellie's unwavering stare. "Enough," Ellie said, her voice low. "You've underestimated me. I don't play games. I build cases. And this," she tapped the stack of papers, "will hold in court." Michael dragged a hand over his face, his eyes darting between his wife and his mother. "God, what if it's true?" he muttered. Rachel gripped his arm. "Don't you dare doubt me. She's doing this out of spite." Ellie's tone softened, though her gaze stayed locked on Rachel. "Michael, I've secured the estate. She can't touch it. You'll be protected, whether you believe me or not. But if you keep ignoring the truth, she'll take everything else from you." Rachel's eyes flashed, venom sparking through her polished exterior. "You bitter old woman. You think you can push me out?" "Michael loves me. You'll die alone, clutching your money while we build a life without you." Ellie's lips curved, not in anger but in something colder. "No, Rachel. You'll be the one left with nothing." Silence settled heavy in the room. Michael's chest rose and fell, torn between two worlds. He couldn't look at either of them for long. Ellie gathered the documents, sliding them neatly back into the folder. She didn't need to shout. The evidence spoke for her. "Next step is legal," she said, turning to Michael. "If you're too blind to act, I'll act for you." With that, she walked out, leaving Rachel sputtering behind her. Later that night, Ellie sat across from Grace in the quiet of her living room. A fire crackled, throwing shadows across the walls. Grace studied her, eyes sharp with concern. "He's hurting," Grace said. "You showed him the truth, but don't expect him to thank you yet. He's caught between guilt and denial. That's a hard place to crawl out of." Ellie leaned back, exhaustion pulling at her bones. "I don't need his thanks. I need him safe. If that means isolating Rachel legally and financially, then so be it." Grace's voice softened. "And if he turns his anger on you in the process?" Ellie stared into the flames, her reflection warping in the glass. "Then I'll carry it. I've carried worse." The letter arrived in a thick cream-colored envelope, Rachel's name embossed at the top of the return address. Inside, the words were cold, sterile, but laced with venom. "Cease and desist. Defamation, legal action pending." Ellie read it once, then again, before setting it neatly on the kitchen counter. Her hands didn't shake. If anything, the edges of her mouth curved with something dangerously close to satisfaction. Rachel was cornered, and cornered animals always bared their teeth. By the time she slid into Tracy Will's office that afternoon, the letter sat in her briefcase like an unwanted guest. "She's bluffing," Tracy said after skimming it, her tone brisk. She tossed the letter aside. "Her lawyer has no idea what he's walking into. Once the evidence comes out, Rachel doesn't have a case. She has a confession." Ellie leaned back, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Good. I'd rather she strike first. It makes her look desperate. Tracy allowed herself a small smile. That's the spirit. At Michael's house that evening, the cracks were widening. He paced the living room while Rachel sat perched on the sofa, her phone in hand, pretending calm. She's gone too far this time, Rachel said smoothly. Sending you fake documents. Dragging our names through lawyers. This is abuse, Michael. But Michael's hands wouldn't stop moving, tugging at his tie, raking through his hair. I looked again at those signatures, Rachel. They don't look right. And the account numbers. How could Mom have faked those? Rachel's smile didn't falter. She hired someone. You think she wouldn't? She hates me. She's obsessed with controlling you. But the seed of doubt had already rooted itself in Michael's eyes. 2 mornings later, Ellie's phone buzzed with a message from Daryl. Check your email. She opened the file and scrolled through scanned images. Bank transfers, forged tax forms, even an application for a personal loan. Rachel's name was nowhere, but Michael's signature was plastered across every page. A signature he hadn't written. Ellie forwarded the documents straight to Tracy. Her lawyer called minutes later. This is ironclad. With these, Rachel's bluff collapses. We can move to court with confidence. She won't just lose access to your estate. She'll face charges. Ellie's breath left her in a sharp exhale. For weeks she had carried the heaviness of betrayal like an anchor. Now, at last, she felt the chain loosen. But Michael wasn't free yet. When she met him at the courthouse steps to deliver the news, his face was pale, his shoulders hunched. She forged me? His voice was raw, barely audible. Yes. Ellie placed the folder in his hands. She used your name like it was hers. She tried to drag you into debt you didn't even know existed. Michael flipped through the papers, his jaw tightening with every page. How could I have been so blind? Because you loved her, Ellie said gently. Because you believed what she wanted you to believe. Anger flashed across his face, not at her, but at himself. He closed the folder with a snap. I'll never forgive her for this. Ellie touched his arm, steadying him. You don't have to forgive her. You just have to let me finish this. That night, Ellie sat by the fire again, the documents spread out between her and Grace. You're really taking her to court, Grace murmured, a note of admiration in her voice. Ellie nodded, her eyes sharp. She wanted a war. Now she'll have one, and I'll win. The fire cracked, sparks leaping like embers of her resolve. Ellie stood in the driveway of Michael and Rachel's home, her gaze sweeping over the manicured lawn, the gleaming windows, the sprawling porch that had once felt like a gift. She had given them this house, a gesture of love, of faith in their future. Now it was a battlefield. The for sale sign hammered into the yard that morning tilted slightly in the breeze, its red letters screaming louder than any words Ellie could have spoken. Rachel stormed onto the porch, her silk robe fluttering, hair half-pinned, rage snapping off her like static. You can't do this, she shrieked, voice echoing across the quiet cul-de-sac. This is our home, Ellie remained calm, her posture straight, her tone cool as stone. No, Rachel, it's mine, and I'm selling it. Michael appeared behind Rachel, his shirt untucked, eyes wide. Mom, you really? Yes, Ellie interrupted, not breaking her gaze from Rachel. The paperwork is filed. Within weeks, this house won't belong to either of you. Rachel's face twisted. You vindictive witch. You'd put your own son on the street just to punish me. Ellie's voice was steady, cutting through the fury. I'm not putting him on the street. I'm putting him in a position where you can't drag him into ruin. The proceeds will go into an account with protections you can't touch. Michael swallowed hard, his eyes darting between them. Is that true? Ellie turned to him, softer now. Yes. Every dollar will be secured in your name. With conditions, you'll finally be free of her debts. Rachel let out a harsh laugh, but the edges of it cracked. You think you can buy his loyalty? He's my husband, Ellie. You can't control everything. Michael's jaw tightened. For the first time, he didn't move to shield Rachel. He just looked at her, really looked at her, and Ellie saw the dawning horror in his expression. Rachel, he said slowly, did you know about the forged loans? Rachel blinked, her mask slipping. What are you talking about? Michael's voice rose, sharp and ragged. The signatures, the accounts. Mom showed me everything. Did you think I wouldn't notice the lies? Rachel's lips parted, but no words came. Ellie stepped closer, her voice a quiet blade. It's over. You don't get to leech off my son or my legacy anymore. 2 weeks later, Ellie sat in Tracy's office, pen in hand once more. The sale papers were thick, the numbers precise. She signed with a flourish, reclaiming what had been twisted into Rachel's weapon. Tracy smiled faintly. The funds will be transferred into Michael's account, but with the safeguards we discussed. Rachel won't get within a mile of them. Ellie nodded. Relief prickled, but it wasn't victory, it was survival. That night, Michael came to her house, shoulders slumped, a shadow of the man he'd once been. She fooled me, he said quietly, almost to himself. All this time, I thought she loved me. Ellie placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice gentler than it had been in weeks. You wanted to believe. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. Michael looked up, his eyes wet with shame. And now what? What's left? Ellie's grip tightened. What's left is a future she can't destroy. But the future wasn't as safe as she thought. The next morning, Daryl called, his tone grim. Ellie, you'd better sit down. I dug deeper into the courthouse records. Rachel filed another loan last month. In Michael's name again. This one's massive, tied to a private lender. The debt is already in collections. Ellie froze, the phone pressed tight to her ear. How much? 6 figures, Daryl said flatly. And the collateral, she listed the house you just sold. If we don't act fast, the sale itself could get tangled in litigation. Ellie's chest went cold, the victory of the sale evaporating into dread. Rachel wasn't just reckless, she was dangerous, and now the noose was tightening around Michael's neck. Ellie stood at the window of her kitchen, watching Michael rake leaves in her yard. His movements were slow, deliberate, not with the vigor of a man doing chores, but with the weight of someone trying to piece himself back together. The crisp autumn air tugged at his shirt, carrying away the last brittle fragments of summer, fitting, Ellie thought. Seasons were changing for all of them. Rachel was gone now, banished to a temporary rental after being pushed out of the house. The litigation over the fraudulent loans still loomed, but for the first time in months, Michael wasn't chained to her manipulations. Ellie sipped her tea and let herself feel a flicker of something rare, relief. Later that afternoon, Michael sat across from her at the dining table, the same one that had borne weeks of evidence and sleepless nights. Now it carried a neat folder of bank transfers, the proceeds from the house sale secured in his name. It's all yours, Ellie said, sliding the folder toward him. But it's locked. You can use it only for the mortgage on your next home, for savings, for your future. Not 1 cent can be touched by Rachel, not even if she comes crawling back. Michael stared at the papers, his jaw tightening. You didn't have to do this. Yes, Ellie corrected softly. I did. I couldn't protect you from choosing her. But I can protect you from the fallout. He rubbed his hands over his face, voice rough. You shouldn't have had to. I should have seen it. I should have listened. Ellie reached across the table, resting her hand lightly on his. You wanted love, Michael. You believed in it. That's not weakness. That's the best part of you. For the first time in months, his eyes met hers without defensiveness, without shame, just gratitude and an ache too deep for words. That evening, Grace stopped by with a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. She clinked hers lightly against Ellie's. You've done it, Grace said with a smile. You tore her claws out and still managed to give Michael a future. Ellie shook her head, a tired laugh escaping. I didn't feel triumphant when I signed those papers. I felt hollow, like winning meant admitting how close I'd come to losing him. Grace studied her, her voice warm but firm. That's what makes you strong, Ellie. You didn't fight for control. You fought for love. And you won. Ellie exhaled slowly, letting Grace's words settle. Maybe there was truth there. Maybe victory didn't feel like fireworks. Maybe it felt like quiet evenings with people who hadn't abandoned her. Later that night, Michael joined her by the fireplace. He lingered awkwardly at first, then finally sat beside her. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself, he admitted, his voice low, for believing her lies, for letting her turn me against you. Ellie reached over and tucked a stray lock of hair from his forehead like she had when he was a boy. We don't need forgiveness, Michael. We need to move forward, that's all. He leaned back, staring into the fire, moving forward, without her. I never thought that would be my life. Ellie's throat tightened. Then maybe it's time to imagine a better one. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Not the strained silence of the past months, but something gentler, the beginning of a fragile truce. Ellie knew their relationship would never return to what it once was. Too much had been said, too much lost. But perhaps it could become something new. Something built on truth instead of denial. She rose later, looking out the window at the yard where the rake now leaned against the fence. Michael's car sat in the drive, not outside Rachel's house, but here, home. Her chest swelled with equal parts sorrow and pride. She had made hard choices, brutal ones, but her family, fractured though it was, had a future. The knock came just after dusk. Ellie opened the door expecting Michael. He'd taken to stopping by after work. The silence between them no longer heavy but companionable. But it wasn't Michael. Rachel stood there, her once flawless hair hanging limp, her makeup smudged at the corners of her eyes. Her designer coat was gone, replaced with something too thin for the chill. "Ellie," Rachel whispered, her voice softer than Ellie had ever heard it. "Please, can we talk?" Ellie didn't step aside. "You've already said enough." Rachel's eyes glistened as she clutched the doorframe. "I know I made mistakes. I was scared. I thought if I didn't fight for a place in this family, you'd push me out. I lost everything, and I can't breathe knowing I ruined it all." Ellie studied her carefully, her heart steady. Once words like these might have stirred sympathy, but now she saw them for what they were, another performance, another grasp for control. "You didn't lose everything because you were scared," Ellie said calmly. "You lost everything because you were greedy, and you're not welcome here." Rachel flinched as if slapped. "Michael won't forgive you for this." Ellie's lips curved faintly. "Michael's already forgiving himself. That's more powerful than anything you can take from him." For a moment, Rachel's facade cracked completely. She looked small, cornered, desperate. But Ellie didn't move, and finally, Rachel turned and walked down the path into the dark, her footsteps fading. The next morning, Michael arrived, a bag of groceries in hand. He set them on the counter, awkward but determined. "Figured you could use some help," he said. Ellie smiled softly, letting him unload the bag. Apples, bread, even her favorite brand of coffee. It wasn't the act itself, but the intent behind it that told her Michael was beginning to stand again, to move forward without Rachel's shadow pressing against him. As he worked, he glanced at her. "She came by my place last night too." Ellie paused. "And?" "I didn't let her in." He exhaled, the sound half relief, half grief. "I think I finally saw her for who she really is." Ellie reached across, touching his wrist lightly. "That's all I ever wanted, Michael. Not to choose me over her, just to choose the truth." Later, Grace sat with Ellie in the sunroom, the late autumn light streaming across the floorboards. "You've done what few could," Grace said, her voice warm. "You tore down a lie without destroying your son. That takes strength." Ellie gazed out the window where Michael was stacking firewood, his shoulders straighter than they'd been in weeks. "Strength," Ellie murmured. "Or maybe just stubbornness. I wasn't willing to let him drown, even if he hated me for pulling him out." Grace chuckled. "Call it whatever you like. It saved him." Ellie leaned back, the quiet of the room pressing gently around her. The scars of betrayal were still raw, but she could breathe now without the sharp ache of fear. She'd learned that forgiveness didn't always mean inviting someone back in. It could mean forgiving herself for the choices she'd been forced to make. That night, Michael joined her by the fire again. "I don't know what the future looks like," he admitted, "but I know I want you in it." Ellie's chest tightened, tears threatening. She kept her voice steady. "Then we'll build it, one step at a time." The flames flickered, shadows dancing across their faces. Ellie felt something settle in her chest, not triumph, not joy, but peace. She had done what was right, even when it cost her. The courthouse was colder than Ellie remembered, its marble floors echoing every footstep, its walls lined with framed portraits of judges long gone. She sat quietly at the back of the courtroom, hands folded in her lap, as Rachel Montgomery was led in by her attorney. Rachel still wore expensive heels, but the shine had dulled. Her hair, once meticulously styled, hung flat against her face. She tried to hold herself tall, but Ellie saw the tension in her shoulders, the twitch at the corner of her mouth. The judge read the charges: wire fraud, forgery, falsifying loan documents. Each word landed like a stone, stripping Rachel of the glamour she clung to. Michael sat beside Ellie, his posture rigid, eyes locked on the woman he'd once sworn vows to. He didn't look at her with anger now. Worse, he looked at her with pity. When the evidence was presented, Ellie didn't flinch. The documents she and Daryl had collected lay stacked on the prosecutor's table. Signatures, statements, receipts. Rachel's greed written in ink. Rachel's lawyer argued desperately: stress, misunderstanding, accusations born of family tension. But the judge wasn't moved. The paper trail was undeniable. At the verdict, Rachel's lips parted as if to protest, but no sound came. Guilty. The word filled the room, heavy and final. Ellie exhaled slowly, her grip tightening on her purse. She hadn't smiled, hadn't even nodded. Justice wasn't sweet. It was steady, necessary, like the click of a lock sliding into place. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted Rachel's name, but she lowered her head, pushed past the crowd, and climbed into the back of a waiting car. Michael and Ellie walked side by side down the steps. For once, he didn't rush ahead or trail behind. He stayed with her. He stopped at the bottom, his voice quiet. "It's over. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." Ellie looked at him, searching his face. There was no hesitation there now, only resolve. "You're sure?" she asked. Michael nodded. "I have to. She built her own prison. I won't stay locked inside it with her." Ellie swallowed hard, pride and grief warring in her chest. She reached for his hand, and this time, he didn't pull away. That night, Ellie and Grace sat in the living room, the fire burning low. Grace poured them both tea, her expression softer than usual. "You did it," Grace said. "She's out of your lives." "Out of his too." Ellie stared into the flames. "At what cost? My son's heart is broken. My trust is gone. Some nights I wonder if I'll ever feel whole again." Grace reached over, squeezing her hand. Wholeness doesn't always come back the way it left. Sometimes it comes back in pieces. You just have to build with what you've got. Ellie blinked back the sting in her eyes. She had built empires, houses, fortunes. Perhaps she could build something softer now. Trust, a fragile but growing bond with her son. Michael came by later, his steps heavy but determined. He sank into the armchair across from her, rubbing his temples. "I keep thinking about the life I thought I had," he admitted. "It was all smoke. And you saw through it the whole time." Ellie leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "I saw because I've lived long enough to recognize the fire behind the smoke. You had to see it for yourself." Michael's lips pressed into a thin line. He nodded slowly, as if finally accepting it. For the first time in months, Ellie felt something break open in her chest. Not relief this time, but hope. The November air was crisp, the kind that carried the faint smell of wood smoke and hinted at winter waiting around the corner. Ellie and Michael walked side by side down Main Street. A rare afternoon together without the shadow of lawyers, investigators, or whispered accusations. Michael had insisted on the outing. He'd said he needed to see the world as it was now, not the version Rachel had painted for him. They passed a toy shop where a young father hoisted his daughter onto his shoulders, her giggle sharp against the chill. Michael slowed, his expression tightening. "I thought I'd have that," he murmured. Ellie followed his gaze, but said nothing. She let the silence stretch, because silence sometimes spoke truer than words. Finally, Michael looked at her. "I don't, though. Not with her. Maybe not anytime soon. And that's my reality now." Ellie touched his arm. "Reality is just the ground you build on, Michael. You can decide what rises from it." That evening, they sat at Ellie's dining table. It wasn't covered in evidence anymore. Just a simple meal she'd cooked. A ritual she hadn't shared with him in too long. Michael picked at his plate, then set his fork down with a sigh. "I keep replaying everything, every lie she told. Every time I defended her against you, I hate myself for it. Ellie shook her head firmly. No, you don't get to hate yourself. You made a choice, Michael. You loved someone. You trusted her. That isn't weakness, it's human. The real test is what you do now. His eyes searched hers, raw and unguarded. And what do you think I should do? She didn't flinch. Let her go. All the way. No contact, no maybes, no door left open. Rachel thrives in cracks. Seal them, and she'll starve. The following week, Michael met with his divorce attorney. Ellie sat outside in the hallway, waiting. When he emerged, his face was pale, but his shoulders were squared. It's done, he said simply. Ellie nodded. That was the right choice. He let out a shaky laugh. Funny thing is, I thought divorcing her would feel like tearing myself apart, but sitting there, signing those papers, it felt like I was finally putting myself back together. Ellie smiled faintly, pride welling in her chest. At Grace's house later, Ellie recounted the day's events over coffee. He's finally doing it, Ellie said, her voice both steady and tired. He's letting her go. Grace leaned back, a smile tugging at her lips. And you? Are you finally letting yourself breathe? Ellie stared out Grace's window, watching the wind rattle bare branches against the glass. I think so. I know I made hard choices, but sometimes the hardest ones are the only ones that keep the people we love standing. Grace reached over, squeezing her hand. You gave him his life back. Don't forget that. Days passed, and Ellie began to notice the small shifts in Michael. He wasn't haunted when he walked into her house. He laughed, tentatively at first, then with more ease. He talked about work, about maybe buying a smaller home for himself, something modest but truly his. Each change was a reminder that healing wasn't instant, but it had begun. One evening, as they stacked wood for the fireplace together, Michael turned to her. His voice was firm, resolute. I've decided, he said. I'm rebuilding. New house, new routine, new everything. No Rachel, no reminders. I need to cut out the rot completely. Ellie froze, the weight of his words hitting her with quiet force. This wasn't hesitation anymore. This was her son, finally choosing to save himself. She set a log on the pile, her voice thick but steady. That's the right choice, Michael. That's the choice I prayed you'd make. He looked at her, his expression softer than she'd seen in years. You were right about her all along. I just wish I'd listened sooner. Ellie swallowed hard, emotions pressing against her ribs. It doesn't matter when you listened. What matters is that you finally did. Snow dusted the rooftops of the suburban street, softening the edges of houses and lawns. Ellie stood at her front window, a mug warming her hands, watching Michael step out of his car across the street. He carried a box tucked under one arm, his breath clouding in the cold. It was the last of his things from Rachel's place. He set the box in his trunk, closed it gently, and lingered there a moment before straightening his shoulders. Ellie felt the smallest swell of pride. He was learning to stand on his own again. Weeks passed, and Michael began carving out a life untethered to Rachel. He rented a modest townhouse across town, nothing like the sprawling home Ellie had once gifted him, but it was his. He filled it with mismatched furniture, a few framed photos, and the kind of quiet that was finally his own. When Ellie visited, he greeted her with coffee brewing, the scent filling the small kitchen. She sat at the worn table while he told her about his projects at work, about a coworker who'd invited him out for drinks, about how strange it felt to laugh again without checking to see who was watching. You're doing it, Ellie said softly, piece by piece. Michael nodded. I thought losing her meant losing myself, but it's the opposite. I'm finding myself again. At home, Ellie pulled out the thick binder that held her estate plans. For the first time in months, she didn't open it with dread, but with reassurance. Every page was in order, every safeguard in place. Rachel had been locked out of every avenue, every loophole. Michael's name sat clearly at the top of each provision, his future carved in black and white. It wasn't the security she had once imagined, simple, untouched, given without question, but it was stronger, harder, won. She closed the binder with care, her hand resting on its cover. For decades she had built wealth, homes, and stability, but this This fight for her son's future was the truest legacy she had ever shaped. Grace visited one evening, wrapped in a heavy scarf, her cheeks pink from the cold. They sat together in Ellie's living room, the fire snapping softly. "I heard Michael's settling in," Grace said with a smile. "He is," Ellie replied. "Not without scars, but he's finding his footing." Grace studied her. "And you? Are you finding yours?" Ellie thought of the long months of battle, the humiliation, the doubt, the anger that had nearly consumed her. She thought of the nights she had sat awake, wondering if she'd lost her son forever. And then she thought of Michael stacking firewood, cooking coffee, laughing again. "Yes," she said finally. "I am." Grace raised her teacup in a quiet toast. "To survival, then, and to peace." Ellie clinked her cup against Grace's, a small smile tugging at her lips. Later, alone in her room, Ellie stood before the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't unscathed. Her eyes carried shadows, her shoulders the memory of burdens. But there was strength too, etched into every line of her face, forged in every choice she had made. She had protected her family. She had protected her son. She had built something Rachel could never touch, a legacy of endurance, of love bound not by ease, but by resilience. "She thought she could break me. I built a future she'll never have." Ellie was trimming the last of the holiday garland from her porch rail when she heard a car pull into the driveway. Michael stepped out, his coat dusted with snow, something long and wrapped in brown paper tucked under his arm. "I brought you something," he said, his voice carrying an edge of nerves. Ellie arched a brow. "Another bag of groceries?" "Not this time." He followed her inside, shaking the cold from his boots. In the living room, he placed the package on the coffee table and unwrapped it with careful hands. Inside lay a cedar box, its hinges worn, the surface marked with scratches from decades of use. Ellie's breath caught. "My grandfather's," Michael said softly. "Dad passed it to me when I turned 18. I kept it in storage all these years, until now." Ellie opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside lay a silver pocket watch, its face delicate, the chain coiled like a snake at rest. It had belonged to her late husband, passed down through generations of Montgomery men. "Michael," Ellie whispered, her eyes stinging. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because it isn't about me anymore," he said. "It's about you. You fought for this family. You saved me when I was too blind to save myself. This legacy exists because of you. I want you to have it, to know I finally understand what you've done for me." Ellie's throat tightened, words failing her. She closed the box gently, pressing her hand over its lid. For the first time in months, the ache inside her chest eased into something else, something lighter. That evening, the phone rang. Michael's name glowed across the screen. "Mom," he said when she answered, his voice steady. "I've been thinking a lot about the past year. I know I can't undo how I doubted you, but I need you to know I see it now. You were right, about Rachel, about everything." Ellie leaned against the counter, the cedar box still on the table beside her. "I didn't need to be right, Michael. I just needed you to be safe." "I am," he said, "because of you." Ellie smiled faintly, though her tone stayed firm. "Then don't waste what I fought for. Live better, that's all I ask." "I will," he promised. Grace stopped by the next afternoon. Bundled in her wool coat, her cheeks flushed from the wind, she spotted the cedar box immediately. "Well, well," she said with a sly smile. "Looks like the Montgomery heirlooms found their way back home." Ellie chuckled, brushing her fingers over the lid. "Michael gave it to me, said it belonged with the one who kept the family together." Grace poured them both tea, her tone turning gentle. "That's what you've done, Ellie. You didn't just save him. You saved what this family stands for." Ellie exhaled slowly, the steam from her cup rising between them. "Funny, isn't it? All this time, I thought revenge would feel like stripping Rachel of everything she tried to steal, but it turns out the best revenge was never about her at all." Grace raised her cup. "Living well," Ellie laughed, the sound warm and unburdened. "Living well, and making damn sure my son does too." That night, Ellie sat alone by the fire, the cedar box on her lap. The flames danced against the glass, their light catching on the silver chain inside. She thought of Rachel, angry, desperate, clawing for pieces of a life that would never be hers. And she thought of Michael, standing taller now, freer, beginning again with a strength Rachel could never give him. Her hand lingered on the heirloom, her heart steady. "They took everything from me," she whispered, her voice firm and clear, "but I gave it all to the one who truly deserved it."